What do you call a fish with no eyes? Check out this sushi, my G's. This was all delivered to me for free. I actually ordered a duck Thai curry last night on a Sunday evening from a takeaway company, a restaurant near me. And they sent a whole platter of sushi at no extra cost for no reason. I was very, very shocked, but yeah, I can't wait to eat this, basically. Just wanted to share that with you guys randomly, but basically what I want to talk about today is Mixdown versus mastering, and I've thought of 7 tips that I think can really help some of you guys approach this a little bit differently, and these tips are designed to help you become a more effective and a more just generally improved producer in the long term, because often we try to shortcut things, and that's where we fall down and hurt ourselves in the long run, and you know, the cycle kind of repeats. So these are 7 ideas to try and get you out of that mindset and try to help you really just like improve like your kind of approach to Mixdown and mastering, so that you can just put in the extra time and work that you need to do the right thing, put your energy into the right areas, so that you'll actually improve like most efficiently in the long term. So I'm going to go ahead and eat this sushi real quick before I record the next part of the video, and then we'll get into tip number 1. Resample the sparkling water. That's not the first tip. So my first tip, guys, is perfect your Mixdown first before you even write, speak, say, enunciate the word mastering. And I'm being a little bit firm, but I think I'm being quite fair because I want to help you guys. And sometimes I still get messages from or you know, people in my Discord sometimes even will write about you know, they want to improve their mastering and things like that, but they're nowhere near the level that they could be with their actual, you know, production and Mixdown yet. And it's really if you really want to like become a great producer, you really want to like just absolutely perfect the art of the Mixdown, and a lot of that actually comes from the actual composing, you know, because like a bad composition won't ever lead to like a great Mixdown. So really nailing the composition first and then nailing the Mixdown is all you really need to focus on for like however many years it takes you to get good at that, or months, or I mean for me it's been like many years to get that nailed, you know. And there's no point in worrying about mastering like at all until you've reached that level where your Mixdown's just like spot on. And the reason for that is that a perfectly mixed down song doesn't actually need any mastering at all. Like, it's already good enough. So that's the whole goal here, and that's the end goal, is to get your song and your Mixdown to be so perfect that the mastering is just like, what's left to improve? Like, there's nothing actually left to improve, because you've done it all in the mix already. And obviously, like, you've heard that expression, you know, said a lot, like it's all in the Mixdown, and do the Mixdown first, don't worry about mastering. But I still like hear people talking about mastering when their Mixdown skills are just not good enough. So I feel like I need to re-stress this point. Like, a master is like the like last little touch to the Mixdown. But you know, if you haven't got that Mixdown done first properly, like really professional, absolutely spotless, there's absolutely no point in even worrying about speaking the word mastering. So tip number 2 is leave your mastering channel completely clean. Now, what I could do is I'll quickly jump into Logic and show you exactly what my mastering channel consists of now. So as you can see, all I have is a clipping plugin. I use the Camel Crusher. Doesn't even show up the settings in Logic. That's great. Doesn't matter. It's clipping the audio at 0, so nothing will ever go above 0. It's a hard clip, a hard ceiling. It's going to just be really useful to make sure you're hearing the final result of when it's going to be bounced out to audio. And then after that, just so we can check the results of, you know, what's actually going on, is a Voxengo Span because it's the best analyzer in my opinion. So to be able to check all the frequency levels across the whole spectrum. And those are the only two things that I ever have on my master while I'm actually producing. Now the reason why this is important to keep your master clean is it's going to force you to make all of the decisions within your Mixdown yourself, and it's going to force you to train yourself to do everything properly and everything by ear. And the reason that I used to as well put like a limiter on my master or something and really turn it up and rag it is because it gives you the impression that the track has more energy and more volume, because it's bringing up all the details in the mix by through the limiter, through its own algorithm. It's bringing up the levels in its own way, but what it's doing is it's shortcutting the process, and it's really bad practice to do it because every decision that you make while you're listening through that limiter is basically a decision that's being dictated by that limiter's specific algorithm. So it may turn up the small details in like particular sounds one way, or it may do it another way depending on the limiter. But at the end of the day, you're not making those small decisions yourself. So you will improve your mixdowns if you hone in a little bit more on the details yourself, and bring up the volumes and get the proper gain staging of all of the sounds in your mix yourself. So if you feel like you're lacking energy, maybe there's a sort of layer in your track that has a bit of tension that could be a bit louder, that can give you that extra energy. And so you don't need to use a limiter to like shortcut that process. You need to compose songs correctly using the right layers, and then you need to adjust the volumes of those yourself and train your ears to make sure that everything is sitting in the most optimum position volume wise, and then you'll just become like, so you'll train your ears so much better, and you'll just become like a much better like mixing and mastering engineer that way. I'd like to take a brief moment to say a massive thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon in the Elite Squad Discord, and I've just made another video for you guys exclusively, which is 7 compositional tips for better bassline arrangements. So I hope you guys will enjoy that. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So tip number 3 is about creating space for all of your main sounds. Now, you have lots of different sounds in a track often, at least I certainly do, and some of these will be like, these extra layers or background things, which are not the kind of sounds I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about, those big, powerful driving sounds like your kicks, your snares, your hats, like your basses, your leads, your vocals, those like main sounds that sort of form the song. Create space for each of those in the mix, and it's easier said than done. But often the case is that you haven't EQ'd each sound, you haven't found the right sweet spot, so you've taken out enough low end in some of these sounds to allow the sound that needs more low end to be heard. So it's really about making sure you can really craft the space for all of the elements so that you can hear them all separately. And that's going to make your song like a lot more dynamic, which is going to be part of the next tip that we're going to get into. But yeah, really pay attention to trying to find those perfect sweet spots with your EQing so that the separate sounds really don't sort of interfere with each other in areas where they shouldn't, particularly in the low end and the mid range where they fight for space. And things like dynamic sidechaining can also help alleviate this problem, because EQing is almost carving the space between the sounds as a whole, but on a broad scale of the timing of a song, you can have changes in that. So that's where example like sidechaining would come in, because if 2 sounds play together at the same time, then you could create that difference in the frequency content just for that moment when their 2 sounds are conflicting. So just pay attention to making sure those main elements all can be heard, like the fundamental sound can be heard like specifically in your whole mix. Let's get into the next tip. So tying in again a little bit with making sure that there's enough space between all the main elements of your sounds. My next tip is focus on the dynamics of the whole song much more than the overall volume or luffs or luffs or lemmings or whatever you call them. I don't even use that analyzer at all. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. I just use my ears and try to get a good feeling from a song. I don't care about the numbers. Like, that means it's music, it's not maths. Anyway, with that rant over, focus on the dynamics of the song, because naturally the song will probably end up sounding louder by comparison anyway if you had just focused on the dynamic of the song rather than the overall final volume. Because the thing is that a real kind of powerful and weighty feeling from a song comes from having the contrast of there not being that power and that weight. So you need to have that difference in your song. You need to have moments where it's very quiet and moments where it's very loud, and it's that difference in the volumes, as a whole in your composition in the song that will make it be perceived as very loud and punchy. Trying to get everything maxed up at the same level, everything at zero, everything at zero, everything at zero, just going to create like a wall of noise. Maybe it'll be loud, but it won't be pleasurable to listen to, and it won't actually be perceived as powerful because you don't have that difference within the track. So always focus on getting that interesting, twists and turns in like the shaping of the song, like with the different volumes and different effects, and just lots going on and telling a story through the changes in energy of the song. Focus on that, like a real immersive experience where the energy is always shifting to create a very dynamic song. And don't worry about the final output, numbers, volume, or any of that rubbish. So tip number 5 is that you should use analyzers, but only as a guide. So I think even for me, it's really helpful sometimes to use an analyzer, and particularly an EQ analyzer like Span. I'm going to show you in the project in a moment exactly what I mean. But yeah, even for me, it's sometimes still useful to use an analyzer. I might pick up on things that my ears just didn't catch at that moment in time for whatever reason. But the main thing is that you should use them only as a guide, and your final decision making should still be done, using your ears at the end of the day, because it's all about, how it sounds and the feeling of the song. So if I just quickly jump into Logic for a moment. So one of my favorite things to use an analyzer for is just to check the level of the bass. So I like to have a lot of sub bass up around this sort of -30 mark on the default settings of Span, or perhaps a bit lower. So I'll try and get my sub bass to go up to sort of this area here. And if I'm working on headphones, sometimes I don't know how loud the sub is, so it's nice to have that visual reference there. Obviously in this song I don't have a sub in, this is just a drum beat. But yeah, and I like to see if there's any particularly harsh spikes that maybe my ears didn't pick up on. And if anything's popping up too much in the mix, I can sort of just sculpt that out. But that's the only real thing I check for with analyzers. And the important thing to note is that, although you may find something that looks strange or funny and you want to sort of take it out, you still got to use your ears at the end of the day, because maybe there was a sort of bell or a characteristic of a sound was really sort of spiky, and you kind of needed that to stay in. So use it as a reference to see, is there anything weird going on? Are the levels kind of okay? And if they are, that's fine. If they're not, try taking it out, but use your ears as that final, barrier, or, that final, what's the word I'm looking for? Just that final decision maker, right? With your ears, okay? Let's get to the next tip. Mastering should be that final 5 or 10% improvement to a track. So I kind of mentioned this before, with having that perfect mixdown means that you don't have to do a lot in the mastering. But even if your mixdown is absolutely spot on perfect, you might be able to get just a little bit more interest out of the track with a bit of mastering. And all we're really doing here is we're taking the whole finished audio file, the whole Mixdown as one final bounced out file, and then we're just seeing how we can improve that singular file, by using EQs and using maybe a few special plugins, or using some saturation, or just mainly just seeing where we can enhance the track a little bit that they haven't done in the Mixdown process. But really, I can't stress enough that you don't need to worry so much about this, because it's such a small detail and difference. And if your Mixdowns aren't on point, then you don't need to be worrying or focusing about that. But that being said, that very small, subtle improvement that is done in the mastering, it's just about, where can you just get a little bit more energy from the song, on which frequency, and what are just a couple of little things that might kind of work to kind of push that whole audio file up just a tiny bit, and not ruin the dynamics, but just give it like a little bit of an edge. And that's all we need to really think about. And it's such a small and subtle detail in the end of the day. If the Mixdown, the better the Mixdown is, the less of a difference the mastering will make. And we want to have the Mixdown so great that you don't really even have much of a difference at all with the mastering. So really don't worry so much about it. So my final tip for today is just to say, you are trapped in a digital realm. And I just want to make this last tip to really, really hammer home this point about, focusing on the Mixdown, not worrying about the master, and focusing on the dynamics and the composition above volume and everything else. I'm going to show you quickly inside the project why this, or I'm going to try and visually show you what I'm going on about here. So again, if we take a look at Span, we are trapped in a box, and if we're making electronic music, there are only so many frequencies you can fill out. There is a limit to everything, and the same with the stereo image. So if you imagine this is like the kind of the floor and the ceiling of each sound, and how low or high in volume it is. We have the same thing with the width as well. So how wide or narrow a sound is also, there is a limit to how wide a sound can be and how narrow a sound can be. So you've got to always bear in mind that you're sort of trapped in a box. So it's all about the decisions that you make, within that box, but everything is limited. And this brings us to a very important point, which is you can't really get an amazing, unbelievable, overwhelming analog sound from a digital song, because we are in a digital world, so it will always be a digital song. So if you have software that emulates, what an analog plugin might do, or it has a special algorithm that kind of enhances the sound, at the end of the day, we're still in a digital world that has rules, and you can't escape those rules, and you can't think that, I'm going to take this digital song, outside, and then master it in like an analog way, and then it's going to be louder than it was before. No, because it's still going to be a digital file with a 0 dB limit on the ceiling. So if you think of it in this way, and this is why I bring up this point. If you think that you're limited into this box always, then again it just reinforces that point of how important it is to make the right decisions within that box. So it's not bad that you're limited. It just means that you have to be more creative with what's going on inside that box. So how dynamic is the song going to be? That's the main sort of part here. So how are you going to fill out that box in the most interesting way across the space of time? So I really want to hammer that last point home, that you're trapped in a digital world. There's nothing you can do about it. There's only so loud you can make each sound. There's only so wide you can make each sound. So it's about, those combinations and the creative ways in which you tell the story through the song that is going to separate your sound and make it more unique. So I hope that clears a little few myths or misconceptions up. At least this is from my experience and my knowledge and my perspective. Of course, there's many other differing opinions, but these are mine and what I believe in. Anyway, I hope that was a helpful video for you guys today. Much love. Peace out. Don't do anything I wouldn't. Ciao for now. Ciao Bella. Arigato gozaimasu.